But it is no surprise that Donald Trump is making gains with minority voters, working class people across the country. The Democrats are in a full-fledged panic. Just listen to James Carville daily. Here is what one pastor in Detroit over the weekend told Donald Trump. Take a listen.
President Trump, I'm so humbled that you would be here. President Obama never came to the hood, so to speak, right? President Joe Biden, he went to the big NAACP dinner, but he never came to the hood. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. Very humble, really nice. Thank you.
My honor.
Now, Joe Biden, he wasn't in Detroit this weekend. No, he was far, far away in Los Angeles, raising millions of dollars in the Southland at an exclusive star-studded fundraiser. Let's see, Barack Obama, idiots like George Clooney, maybe one of the dumbest actors ever. And look at your screen. Here he is yucking it up with Julia Roberts. Oh, and leftist Barbara Streisand, other Hollywood elites. As you can imagine, people least affected by crime of Biden, inflation Biden, Biden's border crisis, they're the ones that seem to like Joey the most. But there is a glaring problem that even Biden's biggest apologists can no longer ignore, that the president of the United States is experiencing a serious mental decline. They're trying to deny it. I'll explain. Every day it gets worse. You can see it with your own eyes. Now, enter a new word from the leftist media mob, courtesy of the Biden White House. They kind of work in sync together. Cheap, fake videos. Keep that in your head. If you dare to show mumbling, bumbling, stumbling, fumbling, shuffling, and dazed and confused Joe, it's simply not true what your eyes are showing you. Like the border invasion. The border's closed and the border is secure. Hunter's laptop, that's Russian disinformation. And at that very elitist star-studded fundraiser in California, former President Obama seemed so worried that Biden might be able to kind of make his way off the stage. Obama gently, he pulled Joe by the hand. It was very cute. It was a loving moment. Put his arm around him, guided him to the exit. Piers Morgan put it, quote, the Obama-Biden arm grab wasn't just a senior moment. It was the moment that everyone realized that the president's not fit for office. Piers, with all due respect, we've known that for a long time. But, of course, this wasn't the first problematic incident in recent weeks. Remember last week, Biden was filmed aimlessly wandering away from the group of G7 leaders. Nobody else moved to go in the other direction, just Joe, before Italy's prime minister gently guided him back into the fold. According to one report, Biden's condition literally shocked allies at the G7 meeting, and inside sources are saying that Biden was, quote, the worst he has ever been. They called his behavior embarrassing. Biden even mysteriously, decided not to go to a dinner with the other G7 leaders. A few days earlier, you might recall, at the Juneteenth celebration at the White House, Biden was just like this for like a full minute and looked very confused before getting tapped on the shoulder. Now, this followed a Wall Street Journal report featuring Democrats and Republicans who are stating the obvious, that Biden is showing major signs of slipping. So how's the White House going to respond to this? They'll do what they always do. The border's secure and the border's closed, right? Inflation is transitory. Another lie. I never once talked to Hunter or my brother or anybody, for that matter, about their foreign business deals. They're now trying to claim that the very real videos that you are seeing don't exist, or that they were doctored, or that they're artificial intelligence, or some kind of deep fake, or were taken out of context. Now, they're simply lying as usual. These are real videos played in context, but according to Corinne Jean-Pierre, you just can't believe your lying eyes. You can't. Take a look.
I think you all have called this the cheap fakes video, and that's exactly what they are. They are cheap fakes video. They are done in bad faith. That was definitely a cheap fake. It was. This was widely fact-checked. that video was widely fact-checked, including by conservatives media, on what happened, what occurred. The president walked over to give a thumbs up to divers who had just landed right in front of him.
Former President Obama and Georgia Maloney of Italy, they physically put hands on the president to guide him and show him, give stage directions. Are they doing that on their own, or has anybody asked them to run the show like that?
First of all, let me spoke to the most recent, right? President Obama, President Biden have a relationship. They are friends. They're like family to each other. And I think that's what you saw. You saw the president put his hand on the back of President Biden, and they walked off the stage.
Yeah, they're such good friends. Obama once said famously about Joe, never underestimate his ability to F things up. Let's be clear. Cheap fake videos, AI deepfakes did not make Joe Biden say that Uncle Bozy was eaten by cannibals. Cheap fake videos did not make Biden say that we are endowed by, the thing. Cheap fake videos did not generate the Her report that said Biden had serious memory issues, didn't even know he was vice president in 2009. Cheap fake videos didn't make Joe fall up the stairs again and again and again, or on stage as it's happened. It didn't make him fall off his bike and not know whether or not to exit stage left or stage right, which happens all the time. Or when he shakes hands with air like this, cheap fake videos didn't do that. Cheap fake videos did not have Biden lie about border security, saying the border's closed and secure, and that inflation was transitory. Cheap fake videos did not generate the story of him looking at his watch as American soldiers' bodies were flown home after his idiotic, horrific Afghanistan withdrawal. And cheap fake videos did not make Joe lie about Hunter's laptop and lie about meeting with Hunter's business partners and being way more involved than he ever indicated. Cheap fake videos didn't cause Biden to mumble and bumble and stumble and make words up that are incomprehensible over and over again. Just a quick reminder. Take a look.
She knows so long as she was denied, our freedom can never be secured.
We'll teach Donald Trump a valuable lesson. Don't mess with the women in America unless you want to get the benefit.
Groundbreaking Asian Americans like Vera Wang and Joan Shingang, I'm going to pronounce right, Shanga Kawawa.
Donald Trump thinks health care is a privilege. Barack and I think it's a right for people to have bad health care. I'll lead an effective strategy to mobilize true international effort to pressure, isolate, and punish China.
Now, here's the point. If they'll lie about something on tape that the world can see, just imagine what else they're lying about. Here's the scary part, though. The Biden White House seems to issue the most brazen lies about issues that are catastrophic, like the Afghanistan withdrawal, the border, inflation. So it really makes you wonder just how bad is Biden behind the scenes, because in front of a camera, he's really bad. Here's yet another example from just a few hours ago. Take a look.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, will the lack of a war cabinet are you worried about the war cabinet? Are you worried about the war cabinet?
Was he like barking? What was that? Anyway, so will the White House try to claim that the video you saw is a cheap fake video? The only thing fake are the lies and the tall tales that Biden tells over and over. Here's a reminder of some of them, but will they pretend that every embarrassing video of Biden is fake? There are too many. Will they continue to tell us that Biden is as sharp as ever behind the scenes? We know that's a lie. That Joe Biden accomplishes more in 1 hour than most Americans do in an entire day. Do you believe that? And when, if ever, will anyone in the mob and the media ever get tired of the lies? Or will Biden's pals in the press, they'll just continue to protect their fellow Democrat for the next 140 days, 91 days until early voting begins in Pennsylvania, and only 10 days until this all-important debate? And, is their strategy destroy Trump at all costs and act like you're fair? That would seem like the real deep fake strategy. One last point. In 10 days, we're going to have a debate. There's one interesting phenomenon. There has been one night where Joe Biden didn't seem to be off, seemed to be alert, seemed to have a lot of energy, hyped up, jacked up Joe, as I called him. That was the State of the Union. I don't know if it was Red Bull. I don't know if it was caffeine pills, whatever it was. I would expect fully that in 10 days, we will see the reemergence of jacked up Joe. Let's see if I'm right. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.